First of all, as a side note, he indicated that Israel just kind of came into existence through political forces post World War II. So he's right there denying Israel as a modern day work of God, the miracle on the Mediterranean. And that may be what's motivating his statement. Beyond that, he tries to make this case that Genesis 12 is just about the seed of Abraham and not the nation of Israel. I'm not sure if there's a reading comprehension problem here or what, because right there in verse 2, it's and you just read it, it says, I will make you a great nation. And it's true, we don't have the name Israel yet, but that's like saying the 13 colonies were not the United States of America because the title United States of America wasn't adopted later. So what he's basically doing, and he's regurgitating a theology. The first time I got exposed to this was through a man named Albertus Pieters, Pieters. It's one thing if an obscure theologian says it. It's another thing if a virtue signal like Cameron says it. So what Cameron is saying is far more dangerous. But Peters was basically trying to argue that, according to Galatians 3, verse 16, we're the seed of Abraham. And so therefore we kind of take over Israel's promises, not understanding the fact that Galatians 3, verse 16 is about the fact that we are the spiritual, as the church, seed of Abraham, not the physical seed of Abraham, as Genesis 12 is talking about, but the spiritual seed of Abraham. When you drop down to Galatians 3, verse 29, you'll see that it talks about a promise, and the noun for promise there is singular. So you put this together, and we as the church are Abraham's spiritual seed because he was justified by faith alone, Genesis 15, verse 6, just like we are. And that's Paul's only point in Galatians 3. It's not a statement that somehow we take over physical Israel's seed and all of her promises. Beyond that, he abuses Romans 2, verses 28 and 29, and Romans 9, verse 6, not all Israel is Israel. And he's trying to make it sound like if you're a believer, then you're sort of grafted in place of unbelieving Israel. And that's not what those verses are talking about at all. What those verses are talking about is within the nation, there are believers and unbelievers. It's very different than the universal church, where the only way you can be a part of the universal church is to be a believer, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 13. But within Israel, there are believers and unbelievers. So unlike the church, God will send the nation of Israel into the 7-year tribulation period to make a division between believing and unbelieving Israel. And by the time all is said and done, 2/3, Zechariah 13, 8 and 9 says this, as does Ezekiel 28, verses 33 through 38. By the time you get to the end of the 7-year tribulation period, the unbelievers will be broken off and sent to Hades, and the only group that will remain will be believing Israel. And it's through that remnant, 1/3, that God will fulfill his kingdom program and covenants through. And you brought this up earlier, Brandon, citing that very point. And that's all Romans 9, verse 6 and Romans 2, verses 28 and 29 are talking about. And one other quick thing, he tries to make this point that somehow, Israel post AD 70, pre-1948 was a nation without a land. So, how could a nation without a land be God's nation? Well, does that mean that the nation of Israel, from the time she was named Israel in Genesis 32 and Genesis 35, until she formally entered her land in the days of Joshua, does that mean during that interim that she wasn't a nation? I mean, that's ridiculous. Israel was out in the wilderness for 40 years and did not enter the promised land until the book of Joshua, and she still retained her distinctiveness as a nation, Genesis 12, verse 2, named Israel, Genesis 32 and Genesis 35 during that whole time. So by way of extension and by way of analogy, Israel can be outside of her land from AD 70 to 1948 and still be a nation. So I don't really understand what his point is. So I guess the bottom line to the whole thing is he's abusing Scripture. He's promoting supersessionism or replacement theology. He is basically saying that the modern state of Israel is a work of man and not the miracle on the Mediterranean. And he's trying to say that somehow the church takes over Israel's promises when we are just the spiritual seed of Abraham and not the inheritors of Israel's physical promises. So that's the best I can do with his diatribe.